You're listening to the TeenTix Arts Podcast, or TAP for short.
Here on TAP, we explore how teens and young people are engaging with music. What is the context that drives our local Seattle music scene? What, how, why, and where are teens listening? And maybe most importantly, how can you be involved?
We conduct interviews, dive into history, and more.
I'm Triona.
And I'm Josh.
On today's TAP, we're covering something broad.
Music production! Woo! I feel like music production is something everyone has some glued-in understanding of in their head. But in fact, I think it's a lot more expansive.
The Berklee College of Music defines music production as by which music is created, captured, manipulated, and preserved so that it can be distributed and enjoyed.
So, music production is something we see regularly and hear about often. Young people are doing it themselves more, with more tools available to do it than ever. Of course, every kind of recorded music you've ever heard involves music production. So, on that topic, Triona, what have you been listening to lately?
I think I've really been listening to a couple of artists that are primarily self-produced. One of my, longtime favorite YouTubers and music artists, Melinda, has her, new full, it's her first, big full album,
Great.
comes out today. Actually, we're recording this on April 30th. And she started out as, really just a comedy YouTuber. She did the Google Translate songs, where you take the lyrics of a song and you put it through Google Translate a whole bunch of times in different languages, and then you bring it back into English and then sing through the ridiculous stuff that comes out of that. And she got really popular doing that. And then she's, since then, in the past couple years, really started focusing more on her own original music. And I think at this point she has a team in her own studio and stuff. But when she started out, she was just recording in her dad's basement, and totally producing herself. And she's really, made herself into, this popular artist. It was very much, an independent effort that she's come really far. And another one of my all-time favorite artists is called House Phone, which is sort of, Carly Besterman kind of they consider it sort of their one-man band.
Cool. And
she went viral on Tumblr, strangely enough.
When was this?
This was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So way after Tumblr's peak, wrote this sort of tavern song called Drinking Song, and it got super popular and completely, she talks about how it changed her life, where really they had this concept album that they'd sort of just been imagining for years, and suddenly people were listening to this song.
Wow.
And suddenly they were like, wait, this might be something I can actually do. And so it was really, again, similar to Melinda, very much like an internet community support that's, built this up into, a project that is now actually feasible. And she's still in the process of working on the full album, but she's released, she releases one or two songs periodically, and it's really interesting to have been listening to their music for, a couple years now and seeing how much the production has changed, because it really did just start as, her sitting in a room with her guitar and singing into a microphone. And now
Absolutely.
it's gotten to a point where there's much more of a polyphonic sound, voices overlapping, more harmony, lots of, more intricate sound design, and technical aspects of the production.
Yeah, I love that kind of evolution when it comes to, starting out small home recording just by yourself, and then eventually growing in scope, as you grow your fan base, and eventually, bring in all kinds of crazy instruments, all kinds of talented people, and just collaborating in that way. When I think of an artist that's had just like such an interesting evolution when it comes to both how they're making their music and who's listening to their music, I think of an artist that over the past year or two has really blown up and exploded in terms of scope and the scale of their popularity. And that's Alex G, indie folk artist with really a lot of roots in kind of, I think, the folk rock of the 70s as well as 90s artists like Pavement. And Alex G, Philadelphia artist, Philadelphia region, started out making music over a decade ago, probably around 2010, making music at home, multi-tracking his voice, his guitar, MIDI instruments, that kind of thing, and eventually gained popularity on the Bandcamp platform before getting a record deal around 2014, 2015. But even after he got this record deal, his popularity was still kind of confined to a smaller group. And over the past few years, really due to TikTok, a lot of this is kind of random, he's just taken off. And he just released a new album last year, I believe, last year, God Save the Animals, and it was the cleanest production sound he's had yet. But one thing that's interesting is as he's gotten more and more popular and he's releasing more and more kind of refined music, the things that have really taken him to popularity is actually his older stuff. It's his more simple, home-recorded, kind of interesting techniques. Not to say that he's no longer using these same interesting techniques, but it's very kind of simple, rudimentary, lo-fi music that's really taken him off. And as this is happening, a lot of people are actually revisiting stuff that's unreleased on a lot of streaming services. And one of these songs that a lot of people are thinking about is called Pretend. And I believe it was originally released in around 2011, so over a decade ago. And it's a long song, it's about 6 minutes long, but you just hear this kind of, that really interesting kind of very authentic, homespun kind of layered guitar sound, and I just love it. I'm a sucker for that stuff, and it's really interesting to think about him making this, probably not to get famous, not to sell out a bunch of concerts, but just kind of at home for fun, and then looking at where he is now. It's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, that's really impressive to think about journeys like that being possible. And you got to imagine, right, with revisiting some of that old stuff and those old techniques, you have to be so much more creative when your resources are limited.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that we don't always think about, where, these, huge artists who have options of all of these different, ways to make sound and all of these different, technical things they can do, they just, right, if they're using the software to insert stuff, versus if you're at home and you only play certain instruments, and maybe you don't have access to certain software, and right, trying to, for example, I think about like, percussion with found objects, right? Like shaking your keys, or, like drumming on a table. And, that being just these, right, some of these at-home techniques where people get so creative with how they make their music, where, sometimes these limitations can really end up expanding the sound of, their songs. Right? And more than just, simple multi-tracking and simple, right, found percussion, more and more people, including youth, are beginning to have easier access to at-home recording and production software and equipment. And professional musicians and people who just record as a hobby are all making songs and albums, and sometimes really popular ones, in their own homes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just like such a profound shift in the music industry from maybe even 20 years ago, when sure, you'd have small kind of local artists who were kind of getting a hit, maybe independently on an independent label, and then were getting signed. it's still such a major shift to really have this level of control over your own music. And I think that at-home music production has played a huge role in this, obviously, along with the internet. And sometimes, as Triona said, people are using an audio interface, like I think it's Scarlett. You plug a guitar or something in, hooked up to your computer, or an audio interface like FL Studio, Pro Tools, which is a little bit higher level. Actually, the last Tap episode 5, so plug that, is about music and film. If you're in a studio and they're scoring something, they're probably going to be using Pro Tools. But, I digress. A lot of times people are just using their laptops, just using GarageBand or voice memos or something like that, and putting together a record that a lot of people are going to hear. And that would not have been the case, a long time ago. So.
Yeah, or a short time ago.
Or a short time ago. Absolutely.
I think the rise of the internet has really changed how we make music, how we, right? We talked about finding music a few episodes ago. We talked about how that has been impacted by, right, digital music and algorithms. And it really opens up the door for so many new opportunities for artists to, self-produce and make a name for themselves and get their music out there without needing to, go through the record companies and, find these executives who think that their music is going to be popular. Right? People have the chance to just try it out and see if the general public likes their music, and we've come a long way from people standing on the sidewalk passing out their demos.
Yeah, and I really love that because, you obviously still can pass it out and get that kind of local connection, but I think there's just something so interesting and really nice about how you can be an artist recording, somewhere in Europe, and someone on another continent can hear your music and enjoy it. Even if you're not popular, like just because of chance. Like there's artists across the country who just I randomly found who are home recording their stuff. I mentioned this guy a few episodes ago, Young Sham, and it's just it's really kind of interesting. You're getting this kind of eye into something you otherwise wouldn't, and I really like that. Can you think of any examples of people people you've heard of who are recording at home, or maybe aren't, but shouldn't, who you think have the potential to take off? Obviously, not everybody who's recording at home, this doesn't mean it's a one-way ticket to success. A lot of this is random, but it gives that potential that wasn't available.
Yeah, I mean, I know, a few episodes ago, we also interviewed Ivy 7, who I believe, started out, really just sort of producing, I think, and still is mostly self-produced, but just recording in her room on a phone or a laptop. But I also think about, I've got a close friend. Her name is Chloe Bilstad. She's an incredibly talented singer-songwriter. She just recently played her first, real big show. And she has not recorded, any of her stuff in, any place, where she could, release it and have other people hear it. And other people should hear it. Other people should have the opportunity to hear it because I think she's incredibly talented.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I was at the show, and she is a, seriously talented songwriter. I actually, for those of you who have seen Back to the Future, there's that scene where Marty is shredding on stage, and someone's cousin, I think Chuck Berry's cousin, it's supposed to be, calls him up and says, that new sound you're looking for? Well, listen to this. I turned to my friend. I said, Phoebe Bridgers, it's your cousin, Dave Bridgers, or Josh Bridgers or something. That new sound you've been looking for? Well, listen to this. Obviously, little touch and go there, but it's really got that sound that I feel like if she recorded something and it got out to lots of people, it has potential to really go places.
She could be huge.
And not that that's necessarily needs to be the goal, but I think it's a very real potential. So either getting into a studio or, as we've discussed, just at home, recording some guitar, recording some drums, that would be amazing.
And that's the thing. There are so many incredibly talented young artists out there, like Chloe, and like Ivy Seven, and like right, all of us, here. Like I think a lot of us here at TeenTix, have some personal stuff that we do with music, and it's right. It's a good reminder that you don't have to wait for opportunities to come to you, right? If this is something you're passionate about, and if you love making music, you can put it out there. We have all of these, technologies now that really do offer so many new opportunities to have your art be seen, have your music be heard. And I think that's a really incredible thing. And I hope that more and more young people continue to take advantage of those opportunities.
I completely agree. And especially if, you live in the Seattle area and you, have involvement with TeenTix. TeenTix is an organization which has so many partners that can really assist in this. I think Totem Star is a great example where you can be mentored as an artist, but also the Vera Project, where we're recording this right now, has classes in recording. There's actually one coming up June 24th, intro to the Vera recording studio. And also basics of live sound is another one that's a little more regular, where it's slightly different, but a lot of just kind of generally managing a soundboard, understanding these levels. That's something that can come in handy for producing your own music. So, even if you don't want to watch, the hours of YouTube and be like, okay, all right, here's how I'm going to do this. There's resources available, and I think that's, if you want to, you should absolutely take advantage of them. That's a wrap for this month's Tap.
The music you're hearing is Periwinkle by Totem Star artist Aliana Gray.
And our playlist is down in the description. We want to thank Grant Vu for editing this episode.
And we want to thank the Vera Project for welcoming us into their space, and Ground Zero Radio for their support in the production of this podcast.
Finally, a huge thanks to our off-mic teammates Xandra and Olivia, and all the other folks at TeenTix whose work makes this podcast possible.
You've been listening to the TeenTix Arts Podcast, uplifting youth voices and artists in the local music scene through access to education and critical discussion.